At 3:10 in the morning, my dad called me from the police station, his voice trembling and thick with blood. "Honey, they are framing me," he whispered. "Your sister-in-law beat me with a baseball bat. But she told the police I attacked her because I am mentally ill. Your brother just stood by and let it happen." When I walked into the precinct and the arresting officer tried to throw me out, he had absolutely no idea he was dealing with the senior legal counsel for the City Police Oversight Commission. I watched all the color drain from his face when I pulled out my badge. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect your family from people who thought they were untouchable. My name is Nia. I am 32 years old and I destroy false narratives for a living. I work as a corporate crisis and civil rights attorney in Atlanta, fighting the very systemic injustices that were currently unfolding inside that police precinct. The drive downtown took exactly 12 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. My grip on the steering wheel was so tight my knuckles ached. My father, Jeremiah, is a retired pastor. He is a 65-year-old black man who spent his entire life building up our community in the historic Auburn Avenue district. He is gentle, proud, and has never raised his hand against a single soul. Yet here I was, racing through red lights, because the system was doing exactly what the system always does when a weeping white woman points a finger at a black man. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the precinct, and the scene hit me like a physical blow. The stark fluorescent lighting illuminated a reality I had fought against my entire career. My father was handcuffed to a metal bench in the corner, blood crusted over his left eyebrow, dripping down his cheek and staining the collar of his favorite Sunday shirt. He looked exhausted, holding his ribs shivering in the freezing air conditioning. No one was tending to his wounds. No paramedic was in sight. Instead, all the attention was focused on the center of the room. My sister-in-law, Chloe, sat wrapped in a thick thermal blanket, sobbing hysterically into the chest of my older brother, Jamal. Chloe was 30 years old, the daughter of a wealthy real estate tycoon, and she wielded her privilege like a loaded weapon. A white police officer was crouching beside her, offering her a cup of water and speaking in low, soothing tones. He was treating her like a fragile victim while my bleeding father was treated like a violent criminal. Jamal, the family golden child who had always chased status and wealth, simply patted her blonde hair and glared at our father. I did not scream. I did not cry. In my profession, you learn that raw anger gives away your power. Cold, calculated precision is what breaks them. I walked straight toward my father, my heels clicking sharply against the linoleum floor. Jamal stepped in my path, his designer suit looking ridiculous in a police station at 4 in the morning. "What are you doing here, Nia?" He snapped, his voice dripping with the usual condescension he reserved for me. "Go home. You are going to make things worse. Chloe is having a severe panic attack." I looked at the brother who had always viewed me as the rebellious disappointment because I chose civil rights law over corporate greed. "You let your wife beat our father with a bat, Jamal," I said, my voice dangerously level. "And now you are standing here playing her bodyguard while Dad bleeds out on a police station floor. Move out of my way before I make you move." Hearing my voice, Chloe let out a dramatic wail. "Keep her away from me, Jamal," she cried out. "She is just as crazy as he is. He came at me, Nia. He did not even know who I was. His mind is completely gone." She buried her face back in Jamal's chest, her shoulders shaking with manufactured sobs. It was the perfect performance. The classic weaponization of white tears designed to paint a black man as the aggressor and secure her position as the undeniable victim. The officer stood up instantly, placing a protective hand near his utility belt as he stepped toward me. "Mom, you need to step back. This is an active investigation and a family matter. If you cannot maintain your composure, I will have you removed from the precinct immediately." I ignored Jamal and turned my focus entirely on the officer. "My father has a severe head laceration and possible broken ribs," I stated clearly, projecting my voice so every officer in the bullpen could hear. "Why has he not received medical attention, and why is the alleged victim the only one handcuffed to a chair?" "He assaulted this young woman," the officer replied defensively, his hand resting on his radio. "Her husband confirmed the old man has dementia and had a violent episode. We are processing the arrest paperwork now. You need to leave the premises right now, or you will be placed under arrest for interfering. He reached out to grab my arm. That was his first critical mistake. I sidestepped his grasp, unclasped my leather tote, and pulled out my identification. I held it up right in front of his face so he could read every single engraved letter. I am Nia Marcus. I am a licensed attorney in the state of Georgia. More importantly, I am the senior legal counsel for the Atlanta Police Oversight Commission. You are currently holding my client, who is also my father, without medical care, based solely on the unverified claims of a woman who has no defensive injuries. While my client is actively bleeding from blunt force trauma, the officer froze. His hand dropped awkwardly to his side. All the color drained from his face so fast he looked physically ill. He stared at the silver shield and the official city credentials that gave me the authority to launch a full investigation into his badge number before the sun even came up. Mom, he stammered, stepping back. I had no idea he was related to someone from the commission. That is exactly the problem, I replied, my voice slicing through the silent room. You did not know who he was, so you assumed he was a threat instead of a victim. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Chief. I said, never breaking eye contact with the terrified officer in front of me. I am standing in the 4th precinct. One of your officers has a bleeding 65-year-old man handcuffed to a bench, while the woman who bludgeoned him with a baseball bat is being served spring water. I need an ambulance here immediately, and I need the cuffs taken off my father right now, or my office will be filing a formal civil rights lawsuit against this department by 8 in the morning. The shift in the room's dynamic was instantaneous. The desk sergeant, who had been ignoring the situation, suddenly grabbed his radio and called for paramedics. The officer in front of me scrambled to pull out his keys. He practically tripped over himself, rushing to my father's side to unlock the heavy metal cuffs. Chloe suddenly stopped crying. The loud, theatrical sobs vanished, replaced by a tense, calculating glare. She peeked out from behind Jamal, realizing her flawless performance was falling apart. I knelt beside my father as the heavy metal cuffs fell away from his wrists. I rubbed his bruised skin, my heart breaking at the sight of his trembling hands, but his eyes were sharp and lucid. I am okay, Nia, he breathed, squeezing my fingers. I am not crazy. She came into my house. She demanded the deeds to the property. When I said no, she just started swinging. Jamal rushed over, his face red with a sudden desperate panic. You are making a huge mistake, Nia, he sputtered. Dad does not know what he is talking about. He is sick. He has been slipping for months. Chloe was just defending herself. We were trying to help him manage his estate because he is losing his mind. I stood up, putting myself firmly between my bleeding father and my cowardly brother. You are a pathetic excuse for a son, Jamal. You stood by and watched this woman attack the man who raised you, and now you are trying to institutionalize him to cover her tracks. Chloe straightened up completely, dropping the blanket from her shoulders. Her voice was no longer that of a terrified victim. It was cold, sharp, and dripping with entitlement. You cannot just come in here and threaten people, Nia. My father is a very powerful man in this city. He has friends in high places. He will have your job for this. I smiled, but there was absolutely no warmth in it. I look forward to meeting him in court, Chloe. But right now, you are the one who just filed a false police report and assaulted an elderly man. The paramedics rushed through the double doors, rolling a stretcher toward us. They immediately began tending to my father, checking his vital signs and applying pressure to the deep wound on his head. I watched as they carefully helped him onto the stretcher, a massive wave of relief finally washing over me. But as they began wheeling my father toward the exit, I picked up his blood-stained coat from the floor. I reached into the inner pocket to grab his reading glasses, but my fingers brushed against a thick, folded piece of paper. I pulled it out and smoothed the creases. The bold black letters at the top made my blood run absolutely cold. It was an involuntary psychiatric admission form fully stamped by a private clinic. Attached to it was a medical power of attorney document. I looked down at the signature line. It was signed by Jamal. He was not just covering up an assault. He had legally signed away our father's freedom before the attack even happened. Jamal grabbed my arm, his grip digging painfully into my skin through the fabric of my blazer. What exactly do you think you are proving here, Nia? He spat the words at me, his breath reeking of expensive scotch and sheer panic. You march in here flashing a piece of metal like you own the place. You are nothing but a lowly lawyer playing dress-up. Do you have any idea who Chloe's family is? The Sterlings own half the commercial real estate in this city. If you embarrass her tonight, if you make this a public spectacle and ruin her family's reputation, her father will pull the funding for my software company before sunrise. I yanked my arm out of his grasp so violently that he stumbled back a step. I smoothed my sleeve, refusing to break eye contact. You let your wife crack Dad's head open with a baseball bat, and your biggest concern is your startup funding. I stepped closer to him, dropping my voice to a lethal register. You have spent your entire life trying to buy your way into spaces that do not want you, Jamal. You married into a family that looks at you like a convenient diversity prop, and now you are willing to step over our father's bleeding body just to keep your invitation to their country club. You used Dad's money to fund your fake lifestyle, and now you treat him like garbage. Before Jamal could stammer out a response, a high-pitched shriek echoed across the bullpen. Chloe had thrown herself back onto the metal bench, her hands clutching her chest, as she began to violently hyperventilate. The performance was absolutely flawless. She kicked off her designer heels and curled her knees to her chest, making herself look as small and fragile as humanly possible. He was going to kill me, Jamal. She wailed, her voice bouncing off the concrete walls of the precinct. He is out of his mind. You all saw him. He had this crazy look in his eyes. He is completely senile. He does not even know his own name anymore. I was just trying to bring him a slice of pie and he attacked me. He is a monster. I thought I was going to die right there in the living room. The white police officer who had backed away when I first showed my credentials instantly rushed back to her side. His protective instincts were fully triggered by the weeping white woman in distress. Mom, please try to breathe. The officer cooed, awkwardly patting her shoulder. We are going to make sure you are safe. No one is going to hurt you here. He shot a defensive, hostile glare in my direction, clearly itching for a reason to put me in my place. Counsel or not, he muttered, you need to stop upsetting the victim. She has been through a massive trauma tonight. A massive trauma. I repeated the words slowly, letting the sheer absurdity of the statement hang heavy in the air. I looked at Chloe. Not a single blonde hair on her head was out of place. Her manicure was pristine. Her silk blouse did not have a single wrinkle or drop of blood on it. Meanwhile, my 65-year-old father was sitting on a gurney 10 feet away, a paramedic pressing a thick gauze pad to a gash on his forehead that was soaking through his collar. The reality of what was happening was entirely clear. I see this setup every single day in my line of work. A black man is injured, yet he is treated as the aggressor simply because a white woman decides to shed a few strategic tears. I did not waste another second arguing with a rookie cop who had already decided who the criminal was before he even stepped onto the scene. I pulled my phone from my pocket and bypassed the contacts list, dialing a direct private line. The precinct was quiet enough that everyone heard the phone ring twice. Chief Davis, I said the moment the line connected. My voice was calm, projecting clearly across the entire room. This is Nia Marcus. I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am standing in the lobby of the 4th Precinct. One of your officers arrested my father, Jeremiah Marcus, a retired community pastor, after he was brutally assaulted in his own home. The assailant is sitting in your lobby right now, wrapped in a blanket and being treated to bottled spring water, while my father is bleeding from blunt force trauma to the head. I paused, making sure the officer in front of me heard every single syllable. I expect a crime scene unit dispatched to my father's house immediately to secure the baseball bat used in the assault. I expect the body camera footage of the arresting officers to be preserved and uploaded to the oversight server by dawn. And if my father is not cleared to leave this precinct for the hospital in the next 30 seconds, my office will hold a press conference at 8 in the morning announcing a federal civil rights lawsuit against this entire department. The voice on the other end of the line was sharp and commanding. Hand the phone to the desk sergeant right now, Nia. I walked over to the elevated desk and placed my phone down. The sergeant picked it up, his face draining of color as he listened to his ultimate superior tear into him. Yes, Chief. Understood, Chief. Right away, sir. He slammed the receiver down and yelled across the room. Get the cuffs off the old man completely. Let the paramedics load him up. Now, move it. The atmosphere shifted violently. The paramedics, who had been waiting awkwardly for police clearance, immediately strapped my father onto the gurney and began wheeling him toward the sliding glass doors. I walked alongside him, grabbing his hand. The skin was cold, but his grip was surprisingly strong. I am right behind you, Dad, I told him. I am going to follow the ambulance in my car. Do not say a word to anyone until I get there. He gave a faint nod, his eyes tired but fully aware. As they pushed the gurney out into the humid Atlanta night air, I turned back to grab my briefcase from the bench. That was when the crying magically stopped. The hysterical sobbing, the hyperventilating, the trembling shoulders, it all vanished in a fraction of a second. I watched as Chloe wiped her eyes completely dry of actual tears and stood up. She smoothed down the front of her silk blouse and pushed her blonde hair over her shoulder. The fragile victim act was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating smirk that chilled me to the bone. She walked toward me, her designer heels clicking sharply on the floor. Jamal trailed behind her like an obedient puppy, refusing to meet my gaze. Chloe stopped just inches from my face. She reached into her expensive leather handbag and pulled out a folded piece of heavy stock paper. She did not hand it to me, she threw it. The paper hit my chest and fluttered to the floor. I did not bend down to pick it up immediately. I kept my eyes locked on hers, watching the pure malice dancing in her gaze. "You put on a great show," Nia Chloe whispered, her voice dripping with venom and victory. "You really think you are the smartest person in the room because you know how to intimidate a few beat cops. But you are playing checkers while my family plays chess." She leaned in closer, the scent of her expensive floral perfume making me sick to my stomach. "You saved that senile old man from spending the night in a jail cell. Congratulations. But you cannot save him from the psych ward." I stared at Jamal's signature on the medical power of attorney, the ink completely unbothered by the blood soaking the rest of the fabric. This was not a sudden panic over a violent episode. This was a premeditated execution of my father's civil rights. The involuntary psychiatric hold, a 1013 form in the state of Georgia, had a timestamp from yesterday afternoon. Jamal had secured a physician's signature a full 12 hours before Chloe ever picked up that baseball bat. I turned around to face my brother. The paramedics were strapping my father to the gurney, adjusting his oxygen mask, but I moved directly into Jamal's personal space. "You had him declared legally incompetent yesterday," I stated, my voice echoing off the precinct walls. "You bought a dirty doctor to sign a 1013 form so you could lock him up in a private facility." Chloe attacking him tonight was not self-defense. It was the catalyst you needed to trigger the medical transport. Jamal did not even have the decency to look ashamed. He straightened his designer tie, stepping out from in front of his wife. "Dad is a danger to himself, Nia. He has been hiding his decline from you because you are never around. I made the hard choice, the responsible choice as the man of this family." "You are not half the man he is," I fired back. "You forged his signature on medical evaluations and bribed a clinic to process the paperwork. That is elder abuse and medical fraud." Before Jamal could respond, the heavy glass doors of the precinct slid open. It was not the police backup, and it was not the regular hospital staff. Two large men wearing dark blue scrubs walked in, pushing a specialized transport chair equipped with heavy leather restraints. The logo on their shirts belonged to Pine Haven Behavioral Center, a private, incredibly expensive psychiatric facility notorious for holding wealthy patients against their will. Chloe crossed her arms, a triumphant smirk spreading across her face. "We called them while we were in the patrol car," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "They are going to take him somewhere nice, Nia, somewhere he cannot hurt anybody else." One of the transport orderlies approached the city paramedics, who were currently stabilizing my father's neck. "Excuse us," the orderly said, flashing a clipboard. "We have a valid power of attorney and an active 1013 hold for Jeremiah Marcus. We will be taking over the patient's transport to a specialized psychiatric unit." The city paramedics paused, looking confused. They glanced at the paperwork the orderly shoved in their faces. In the state of Georgia, an active 1013 form, paired with a medical power of attorney, gives private medical contractors the absolute right to bypass emergency rooms and take custody of a patient. Jamal had planned this perfectly. Once they got my father behind the locked doors of Pinehaven, he would be heavily medicated, completely stripped of his communication rights, and entirely under Jamal's legal control. "You cannot interfere with this," Nia Jamal said, a sickeningly confident grin breaking through his earlier panic. "I am his legal guardian now. The state recognizes my authority. Step aside and let the professionals do their job." I looked at my brother, then at his smirking wife, and finally at the two large men moving aggressively toward my bleeding father. They thought they had backed me into a corner. They thought a piece of paper signed by a corrupt doctor was going to override my authority. I did not argue with the orderlies. I simply pulled out my phone and accessed the expedited judicial portal on my home screen. As the senior legal counsel for the Oversight Commission, I am required to carry a direct emergency line to the on-duty Superior Court judge for warrants and civil rights interventions. I tapped the screen, uploading a high-resolution photo of my father bleeding in handcuffs, alongside a digital copy of the police report I had just forced the desk sergeant to file regarding the assault. The orderlies grabbed the rails of my father's gurney. "Ma'am, you need to clear the way," the larger one barked. "Do not touch that gurney," I commanded. My voice cracked like a whip, causing the entire room to freeze. Jamal let out a loud, theatrical sigh. "Nia, stop embarrassing yourself. You are a lawyer. You know how a POA works. You have no jurisdiction here." I stared directly into Jamal's eyes as I hit send on the digital petition. "I know exactly how a POA works, Jamal. I also know how an emergency ex parte injunction works." My phone vibrated in my palm less than 10 seconds later. I held up the glowing screen for the orderlies to see. The digital seal of a Fulton County Superior Court judge glowed brightly at the top of the PDF. "This is a court-ordered emergency injunction overriding your medical power of attorney due to an active criminal investigation of elder abuse and attempted homicide. The 1013 hold is hereby suspended. My client is entirely under the jurisdiction of Atlanta General Hospital, and if either of you take one more step toward him, I will have the desk sergeant arrest you for interfering with a federal civil rights investigation." The orderlies stopped dead in their tracks. They looked at my phone, saw the judge's digital signature, and immediately backed away from the gurney with their hands raised. They wanted a paycheck, not a felony charge. Chloe's smug smile vanished instantly. Her face contorted into pure rage. "You cannot do this," she screamed, completely abandoning her fragile victim persona. "He is dangerous. Jamal, do something." But Jamal was paralyzed. He stared at my phone like it was a loaded gun pointed directly at his chest. The city paramedics wasted no more time. They seized the opportunity, pushing the gurney right past the retreating orderlies and heading straight out the sliding glass doors toward the waiting ambulance. I turned my back on my brother and his wife, leaving them standing in the middle of the precinct, surrounded by police officers who had just witnessed their entire scheme fall apart. I sprinted out the doors, the humid night air hitting my face, as I caught up to the paramedics loading the stretcher into the back of the ambulance. I climbed in right behind them, taking a seat on the narrow bench as the heavy doors slammed shut. The sirens blared to life, tearing through the quiet streets of Atlanta as we sped toward the hospital. My father was lying flat on his back, an oxygen mask over his nose and mouth. His eyes closed against the harsh overhead lights. His breathing was shallow but steady. I reached out and gently took his hand, holding it tight. "We are going to a real hospital, Dad," I told him, keeping my voice soft and steady. "You are safe now. I am going to tear up that power of attorney tomorrow morning. They will never get near you again." I felt his fingers tighten around mine with surprising force. He slowly pulled the oxygen mask down, slightly, ignoring the paramedic's immediate protest. His chest heaved as he struggled to speak, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent a chill straight down my spine. "Nia." He wheezed, his voice raspy and desperate. "You have to listen to me. This was never about putting me in a facility." I squeezed his hand. "I know, Dad. They wanted to cover up the assault. They wanted to silence you." He shook his head weakly, a fresh drop of blood slipping past the bandage on his forehead. "No," he whispered, coughing violently before catching his breath. "They do not want to lock me up. They want the land. They want your grandmother's property on Auburn Avenue. I froze. The historic Auburn Avenue estate. It was a massive multi-acre lot right in the middle of the most aggressively gentrifying district in the city. My grandmother had left it entirely to him, and developers had been circling like vultures for the past decade, offering ridiculous sums of money that my father had always flatly refused. Jamal had the papers in his briefcase. My father continued, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper as the ambulance swerved around a corner. He brought Chloe to the house tonight to force me to sign the transfer deeds to her father's company. When I refused, they pulled out that psychiatric form. They told me I could either sign over the multi-million-dollar property or they would declare me legally incompetent and take it anyway. When I reached for the phone to call you, Chloe picked up the bat. I sat back on the hard metal bench, the full magnitude of their betrayal crashing over me. This was not a panicked reaction. This was a multi-million-dollar hostile takeover orchestrated by my own flesh and blood. Jamal was willing to sell out our family's legacy and institutionalize his own father just to secure his position in Chloe's wealthy white family. A cold, dangerous calm washed over my entire body. I looked down at my father, his tired eyes pleading with me to protect the only thing our ancestors had left us. "Do not worry, Dad," I said, my voice eerily quiet over the blaring sirens. "They think they just lost a battle at the precinct. They have no idea I am about to burn their entire war to the ground." The ambulance tires screeched to a halt outside the emergency room bays at Atlanta General Hospital. I watched the medical team rush my father through the sliding glass doors, his blood still stark against the pristine white sheets of the gurney. The attending trauma doctor immediately ordered a CT scan and began prepping him for 12 stitches across his forehead. I stood in the sterile hallway, my hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline from the police station began to metabolize into a cold, hard focus. Jamal and Chloe wanted a war over the Auburn Avenue estate, and they were willing to spill our father's blood to get it. I was pulling out my phone to contact my private investigators when the emergency room doors slammed open. My mother, Beatrice, stormed into the waiting area. She was fully dressed in a tailored navy suit and pearls, her hair perfectly styled despite the fact that it was nearly 5 in the morning. Jamal and Chloe trailed right behind her like shadows. They had clearly gone straight to our family home to fetch her, spinning their own twisted narrative before I even had a chance to speak. I stepped forward, expecting to see terror and concern in a wife's eyes. I expected her to ask about my father's condition. I opened my mouth to tell her he was going to be okay, that he was getting stitched up just down the hall. I never got the words out. Beatrice marched directly up to me, raised her hand, and slapped me across the face with such force that my head snapped to the side. The sharp crack echoed down the quiet hospital corridor. A passing nurse stopped dead in her tracks, eyes wide, but I held up a hand to signal I did not need intervention. The sting burned across my cheek, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the absolute betrayal radiating from my mother's glare. "Are you trying to destroy this family, Nia?" my mother hissed, stepping so close I could smell the expensive mints she always chewed. Her voice was a low, venomous vibration that demanded submission. "What is wrong with you? You marched into a police station and humiliated your brother in front of the entire department. You undermined his authority as the man of this house." I stood frozen, tasting copper where my teeth had caught the inside of my cheek. "He tried to have his own father committed to a psychiatric ward, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "He stood there while his wife beat your husband with a baseball bat. Dad is 30 feet away from you getting his skull stitched back together, and you are worried about Jamal being humiliated." My mother did not even glance toward the trauma bays. She did not look through the glass where her husband of 40 years was lying bruised and battered. Instead, she turned around and reached out her hands toward Chloe. Chloe stepped forward, burying her face in her hands, squeezing out a fresh batch of completely fake tears. She held out her left arm, displaying a microscopic, barely visible red scratch near her wrist. It was a scratch she likely gave herself in the police car just to have something to show. "Oh, you poor sweet girl," my mother cooed, her voice instantly transforming from venom to dripping honey. She gently stroked Chloe's arm as if it were a mortal wound. "I am so terribly sorry for what you had to go through tonight, Chloe. Please, You must forgive Jeremiah. His mind is just completely gone. He does not know what he is doing anymore, and Nia has always been prone to these dramatic, hysterical outbursts. Please do not hold this against us. I watched my own mother bow her head and apologize to the white woman who had just tried to kill my father. It was the most sickening display of internalized subservience I had ever witnessed. But it also told me a story spanning decades. This was not just about tonight. This was about my mother's lifelong obsession with status, her desperate craving for validation from the white upper class, and her absolute worship of the Sterling family name. You have lost your mind, Beatrice, I said, dropping the title of mother entirely. That woman almost murdered your husband, and you are treating her like she is the victim. My mother spun around, her eyes flashing with a frantic, desperate anger. Chloe was just defending herself, she snapped. You do not understand anything about how the real world works, Nia. You never have. You sit in your little civil rights office fighting battles you cannot win while your brother is actually building something real. Do you have any idea who Chloe's family is? The Sterlings own half this city. Her father sits on the board of the country club. He has the power to make or break Jamal's entire future. Are you trying to make your brother get a divorce? Are you trying to ruin his one chance at actual wealth? The pieces clicked together in my mind with terrifying clarity, the speed at which she defended them, the complete lack of surprise regarding my father's supposed dementia, the way she had arrived dressed to the nines, ready to perform for her wealthy daughter-in-law. She was not brainwashed by Jamal's lies. She was a willing participant. You knew, I stated, the realization dropping the temperature of my blood to absolute zero. You knew Jamal was planning to institutionalize Dad. You knew they were trying to steal the Auburn Avenue estate. Jamal shifted uncomfortably behind Chloe, refusing to meet my eyes, but Beatrice did not flinch. She straightened her posture, lifting her chin with a chilling sense of righteous justification. Your father is a stubborn, foolish man who refuses to see the bigger picture, she said, her tone devoid of any marital affection. That land has been sitting there gathering dust and tax bills for years. He wants to hold on to some outdated piece of history while developers are practically throwing millions of dollars at our feet. We have struggled for decades, Nia. We scraped by while other people lived in luxury. I stared at her, feeling sick to my stomach. So you helped them trap him. You helped your son orchestrate a false medical diagnosis to lock your husband away in a facility just so you could cash in on his property. Beatrice stepped forward, invading my space one last time. There was no mother left in her eyes, only a greedy, hollow shell of a woman who had sold her soul for a zip code and a designer handbag. Your father is old and useless, Nia, she said, her voice dropping to a harsh, cold whisper that echoed in the sterile hospital corridor. He has served his purpose. Thanks to Chloe, your brother is about to become a millionaire. Do not get in this family's way. I stared at the woman who gave birth to me. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. A mother's love was not unconditional. It came with a massive price tag, and my brother was the only one willing to pay it. I did not waste another breath on Beatrice. My grief evaporated instantly, replaced by a razor-sharp focus as the heavy double doors of the trauma unit swung open. A tall physician with slicked-back hair and an arrogant stride walked into the waiting area. His pristine white coat bore the embroidered name, Dr. Montgomery, Chief